ranking NBA dynasties by their number of championships. Starting off, there's 6 teams in this bottom tier, the honorable mentions, with 2 championships apiece. First, Willis Reed and Walt Frazier's New York Knicks in the early 70s, then John Havlicek and Dave Cowan's Boston Celtics also in the early 70s, then Isaiah Thomas's Bad Boy Pistons in the late 80s, early 90s, then Hakeem Olajuwon's Houston Rockets in the mid-90s, then Kobe and Powell's LA Lakers in the late 2000s, and then LeBron, Wade, and Bosh's Miami Heat in the early 2010s. But moving on, our first legit dynasties are here in this 3 championships tier, which has 2 teams, the Boston Celtics of the 80s with Bird, McHale, and Parrish, and Shaq and Kobe's three-peat LA Lakers of the early 2000s. Next, in this 4 championships tier, there's just one team. It's the most recent dynasty. It's Steph Curry's Golden State Warriors of the late 2010s and early 2020s. Then moving on to the 5 championships tier, where we have 2 more teams, the Showtime Lakers of the 80s with Magic, Kareem, and Worthy, and Tim Duncan's San Antonio Spurs, primarily in the 2000s. Then we reach the upper echelon, the 6 championships tier, and here we have 2 more teams. First, it's George Mikan's Minneapolis Lakers from the 50s, and then of course Michael Jordan's Chicago Bulls of the 90s. Finally, there's one dynasty head and shoulders above the rest in terms of total championships, and that's Bill Russell's Boston Celtics of the 60s, winning a remarkable 11 titles in total. So, those are all the dynasties in NBA history and the honorable mentions. However, there's one crucial piece of information that's missing here, and that's the number of teams that were in the league when these teams won their championships. Now, that might not seem like such an important thing, but if we bring it in here, you can see just how different the league was, for instance, back in the 60s when the Celtics won their 11 titles when there was only about 9 teams in the NBA, as opposed to the 90s when Jordan won his 6 and there was 28 teams. Not to diminish the accomplishments of those old teams, but it's just a fact that statistically, you're much less likely on average to win a championship in a big league with a lot of other teams, as opposed to a small league with just a couple of other teams. I don't think it's a coincidence that the team with the most dominant dynasty occurred during the period when the NBA had the least number of teams. So with that in mind, let's reorder the dynasties, weighting each title based on the number of teams that were in the league at that time. In that case, we still have the honorable mentions, the 6 teams at the bottom with 2 titles each. And then, again, they're followed by Bird's Celtics from the 80s. But then things start to change, with Mikan's Lakers from the 50s coming next. You can see how much less weight each of those 6 titles carry, considering that there was only 12 or so teams in the league at the time. Following Mikan, you get the Lakers three-peat next, and then it's Bill Russell's Celtics with their 11 titles coming in a tiny league with a handful of teams. Then the new top 4 are the Showtime Lakers, Steph Curry's Warriors, Tim Duncan's Spurs, and then at number 1 is Michael Jordan's Bulls. This looks a little more fair, taking into consideration the relative degree of difficulty of each championship. So that's all well and good. However, there's one more factor that I'd like to introduce, and that is the number of times each of these teams got to the finals but lost. Because part of being a dominant dynasty is consistently being in the mix, even if you don't necessarily win the whole championship every year. So here are the number of additional trips each of these teams made to the finals where they ultimately came up short. You can see how the Showtime Lakers not only won 5 championships, but were also in the finals 4 additional times. Meanwhile, the 2 90s teams, Jordan's Bulls and Olajuwon's Rockets, never made it to the finals other than the times they won. So now we can add these extra finals trips into the equation as well at half of the value of a successful championship. And when we do that, the results look like this. Jordan's Bulls remain in first, but now the Showtime Lakers are the second dynasty, followed by Duncan's Spurs, Curry's Warriors, and Russell's Celtics are again in 5th. Then there's a few other teams that move up and down, but overall, this seems like the most accurate ranking of the NBA dynasties. So that's it. What do you think of this NBA Dynasty ranking? You could obviously continue adding more and more information, such as the team's regular season winning percentage during their run, and so on, but for now, we'll leave it at that. Alright, thanks for watching.